Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 149. And this episode, we're taking a look at how smaller pieces and systems and ideas within a larger game structure create something greater than the sum of its parts. Or, if you just want to say that quickly at a cocktail party, because I know how many fancy cocktail parties we are all going to these days, emergent gameplay. And to better discuss that, we brought in an expert, a friend, and somebody who covered this topic very well very recently on their show from Tales from the Backlog, Dave Jackson. Mr. Jackson, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I'm excited to talk about this this topic here today. It's become, I did my episode on my show recently, and then like a huge game has come out recently that is like front and center emergent gameplay. So it's back on the brain.
When I was listening to that episode, because it is so close on the new Legend of Zelda, when Breath of the Wild kept being referenced, I was going, are we just forgetting what the subtitle for the new game is? Oh, this was recorded before Tears from the Kingdom.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
I've been wanting to have Dave on for a while. I, of course, was lucky enough to guest on 2 episodes to this point of Tales from the Backlog. And I know Geoff and I will be guesting on a future episode together with another guest, which I'm excited about. I will come back and eventually play a Yakuza game with you because we've said it. We put it out in the universe because we are big Yakuza fans. This actually, Geoff, this whole episode is an intervention to get you to play the rest of the Yakuza games. That's all. We lied about the whole thing.
Oh, God. Oh, no.
We actually have 3 other people in the waiting room. They're ready to come in.
Oh, no. Do I have to sing karaoke with all of them?
Yes.
Because that's not a threat.
It's true. But before we get into emergent gameplay, Dave, since you did that episode so recently, why don't you, tell folks a little bit about what Tales from the Backlog is, and we'll give you a longer pitch at the end, and then give a brief definition of what emergent gameplay means in this context.
Yeah, so first, thank you once again. My show is called Tales from the Backlog. It is a weekly games review podcast, but it's backlog games that are being reviewed. Not normally the new releases, and when I do new releases, that episode comes out like 5 months later. So I'm not on the cutting edge of the hype cycle. So just a quick pitch is we do reviews, deep dives, but it's broken into a non-spoiler deep dive and then a full spoiler discussion. And I did that so that if you haven't played any of the games, like say Yakuza, there's been a couple of those now, you don't want to be spoiled on the story, you can come in and see what makes those games special, because they are special. And then you can tap out when that spoiler wall starts and avoid the spoilers. So that's my show. Matt's been on it. We did an episode very recently about why we love the Yakuza series. And then before that, we did Bayonetta 3. Which was a bit more of a mixed bag, but still a very good conversation that I'm proud of, regardless of how the game went.
Fair enough. Yeah. A mixed bag is, I think, the nicest way to put Bayonetta 3.
Yeah.
I have plans to revisit the Devil May Cry series this year. We'll see if it happens. And I expect the same mixed bag from Devil May Cry 2, but we will see.
Yeah. So emergent gameplay, the topic today, is kind of a term that to me means when a game is built of very simple systems or mechanics that can all interact with each other in interesting ways, so that you can use what you know about how, let's say, fire and grass interact to do something in Breath of the Wild or in Tears of the Kingdom, and how you can use that reaction. Or let's say the example I gave in Breath of the Wild in that episode on my show was how electricity will hit metal objects and enemies will pick up weapons nearby. If there's a storm happening and you give them an opportunity to pick up a metal sword, they'll get hit by lightning. That's emergent gameplay. You're using these simple systems to create complex reactions and solutions to problems. This is like the secret sauce, I think, for what makes some of my favorite games my favorites. So that's why I'm really excited to talk with both of you about this topic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
For sure. I mean, you hinted at it at the beginning, but we are recording this a few weeks after Tears of the Kingdom has come out. But for the emergent gameplay side, there are some new mechanics that take it deeper, but for the most part, it's the same emergent mechanics from Breath of the Wild. You set grass on fire, updraft, you can fly into the air. If you set the grass on fire near an enemy. The fire might follow along the grass and light the enemy on fire, things like that. It's funny, those kinds of things in games are something that I don't think about until I experience them. And then when I do, I go, oh, that's neat. Well, I would try this. And like some games do it much more simply. Like one of my favorite franchises of all time, Mass Effect, has explosive canisters. I don't think they ever, they may in the third game teach you to specifically shoot them so they explode. Something that's fun because you have force-like powers in that game is you can pick up those canisters and chuck them. They hit things and also explode. I think it's really cool to see how, as games get more complicated, you can interact with these systems. And it's not just complicated games. Older games have done stuff like this as well. But I think that kind of interactivity is like, hey, I can do this in real life. Oh, I can do it in the game too? Like, those kinds of things are really interesting.
Well, and especially in older games, if you've been gaming your whole life and you started in much older systems than what we have these days, you're used to there being limitations to what you're able to do. We've all played those games where you can jump 30 feet in the air, but you can't cross this waist-high fence because the game won't let you. But that also engenders the idea of let's test the limits. How do these things interact with each other? I have this hammer. What gets smushed when I smash? And you test that out and you're used to a lot of times not getting much of a reaction, so that when different titles of different seeming complexity have not necessarily consequences, but reactions and feedback for using all of those, it is very freeing and very exciting. And it almost becomes the promise of Fable really starting to come back to us and really starting to come alive. I give Peter Molyneux no credit for this.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned like older games or more simply designed games, because games today do this too, where you'll come across a problem and there's one way for you to get through it.
Yes.
Like you come across a room full of enemies and the way to get through it is just kill all the enemies and then the door opens at the end. But there's a lot of other games and even older stuff. I mean, by older, I mean like the original Deus Ex, which came out in 2000 or something like that, or the Thief games, which were around that same time, where you'll come across a room with an enemy. You don't have to kill that enemy if you don't want to. There's going to be other ways to get through it. And the thing about emergent gameplay that kind of makes it great for me is that when I come across those solutions, they feel like my solutions. I feel like a smart and special boy for figuring out how to get through that, especially if I didn't just take the direct route by killing all the enemies. And so when games provide you with maybe not like the full sandbox, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, because that's wild what you can do in that game. But even games where like they'll give you 2, 3, 4 different ways to get through it. If I figured it out for myself using the tools that I have, it makes me feel great about my problem solving. And it's just fantastic to come up with that stuff myself. You know, really simple stuff like find this one key to open that door. It's the only way to get through. Or kill this enemy to open that door, and it's the only way to get through. Giving me those options. Maybe kill the enemy or find the key. Let me choose, you know?
For sure.
Yeah. The idea of a single key for a single lock, it seems almost a little antiquated. And if you are doing that in your game design, you are typically, if it's a successful one, you're evoking a different time. You're evoking those sort of very esoteric solutions to point and click puzzles ideas that remind me of those sort of schoolyard riddles that have deeply weird specific answers so that you can feel smug because someone doesn't know the specific answer that you know.
We're talking about keys and emergent gameplay and stuff. So one of my favorite game developers is Arcane Studios, because they're masters of emergent gameplay and letting me be creative and find my own solutions. And their older games, Dishonored and Prey Moon Crash, which is like it's a step up from Prey in that regard. Even Deathloop let you be creative with the tools you have to solve the problems that they lay out in front of you. And in Redfall, their newest game, they went back to, here's one key you have to find to open one door. And I think that's one of the biggest reasons why a lot of people are disappointed in that game, because there is no emergent gameplay. There are no emergent solutions to those problems. There are other types of emergent gameplay that come up when you're fighting enemies and using environmental hazards and stuff like that. But the problem solving is just not there in the same way that made Prey, Moon Crash, Dishonored some of my favorite games ever.
Yeah, I think that the problem solving thing is a really important bit. Like Geoff and I, at this point, you'd heard those who are on our Patreon at the $10 level have heard our discussion of Tears of the Kingdom a bit, because I've been talking about playing it and we give an update of the stuff we've been playing. But like I'm not going to spoil anything. We're going to try and avoid spoiling anything in any of the games we're talking about. But like for Tears of the Kingdom, there was definitely a puzzle that was kind of a Rube Goldberg sort of machine. Like something's moving through a process and you have to pull stuff out. And they definitely wanted you to use your powers to change the direction or shift this machine. And instead, I climbed into the machine, grabbed the item I needed, and then Ultra handed it to the place it needed to go outside of the puzzle. And the game went, okay, sure, you can do that too. And that's the kind of emergent gameplay that I like, where you're rarely penalized for it, unless also like a Breath of the Wild thing of like, what happens if I throw this barrel at the enemy? It explodes and we all die. And if I'm too close, I die. Like that kind of paying for your choices, I don't mind. But like even things like problem solving in Skyrim. One of the first games I think I really noticed emergent gameplay was Skyrim and Prey. And I played Skyrim before I played Prey. I actually played Prey quite late. But like the first time I thought, well, I have this bucket and technically if the shopkeeper can't see you, they won't stop you from stealing. Like, cause I knew that because I had hid under desks or I'd like hid behind walls and grabbed stuff while I was out of line of sight. And I went, but what happens if I put this bucket on their head? A famous meme now. And so I did that and then took something and nothing happened. And I went, no, this can't be real. And then like literally looted the entire shop. And like my favorite thing about emergent game is when the player goes, can I? And the game goes, yes. It's why Tears of the Kingdom has been such a joy for me. But it's also why games like Elder Scrolls and Fallout also I really love. And Bethesda's hit or miss sometimes. Not all of their games are great, but what I do love about their games is that you can problem solve in a variety of different ways, whether it's talking, fighting, hiding, and so much more. And while I don't want to do that in every game, what I like about doing it in those games is you don't always have to be heroic to be the hero. You can kind of do things differently. And I think that's really neat. This is not me saying that there's anything wrong with games that are a straight line, but I found even games that are a straight line, your action platformers, whatever else, they still let you kind of think your way out of a solution. I think it is, like Geoff said, very archaic, very Nintendo, very Atari to be like, there's one way to do this. Whereas even in more modern platformers, like I know in Shovel Knight Dig, for example, you're always going down, right? But where you go, what you explore, what you find, and the tools you use to do it even, because it's a roguelite, change constantly, but you can also change and make other decisions and see how the systems interact with each other. I don't know that everyone thinks, hey, I wonder if I could break this thing. But I love the people who do because they give us the best examples of these kinds of systems that affect each other.
I mean, I think more solutions should start with, so I have this bucket. I love that. But I think some of this is the shift of what the locked door is, because really playing games is about completing an objective. And sometimes that is as simple as reach end of game. It's save princess, kill enemy, find hidden object, whatever. It's solving that problem. It's a fighting game. My problem is you're my opponent and you have too much health right now and I need to deal with that. And what emerges is changing it from the problem is the door is locked to the problem is you need to get to the other side. Mm-hmm. And that changes the thought process on how you get there and where you get there. And where I think this is kind of succeeding in more recent times is not just the march of technology. I mean, I don't think it's that much of a coincidence that when Thief was coming out and when Metal Gear Solid was coming out and, the late 90s, early aughts, there was a big boom in terms of 3D game design. But I think a lot of it is the codification of a lot of game engines. It used to be very much proprietary game engines for everything. And there's still customized game engines for all kinds of things that are made. But how many games do you play now that start or end with made in Unity, made in Unreal Engine, made in whatever else? And that allows for a lot of those sort of solutions where 40 years ago, you might have gone, hey, wouldn't it be really cool if you could set something on fire and the fire just keeps going? Yeah, but we don't have the processing power for that. Or, yeah, we need to make a system for that. Somebody's already made a system for that. Someone's already made an engine. Let's pop it into our game, solve some issues. I know it's not that simple, but it is, as far as the design flowchart goes, it's that. And so that allows for more imaginations, more designers, more companies to explore, yeah, but what if? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But we get to reap the benefits of sometimes you just got to fling yourself over the wall instead of finding the key.
Yeah, I think one of the keys to that is that developers can do that now, do more of that stuff, right? but also that mindset seems to shift for a lot of developers. And like, again, Nintendo is front and center with this right now, where they're not as precious about how you solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these interactions, like the story that Matt told about the shrine in Tears of the Kingdom, it feels like you're getting one over on the developer when you do something like that, right? It feels like
Yeah.
I've tricked them. There's no way they thought someone would do this. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But what they didn't do is say, no, you can't do that. We want you to solve this our way. And so by giving you this more complex tool set, many, many more combinations of solutions are going to be possible. And I love when the developers are like, hey, if you think of something, it might not look pretty getting there, like catapulting yourself over a wall or something like that. But hey, if you do it, that's cool. I've definitely done stuff in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom in shrines where it's not the most graceful solution, but that, do still plays. And I'm like, okay, they're happy with me. Moving on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And honestly, it just makes for a better story, your own emerging narrative of the great noble swordsman Link yeeting himself through ancient ruins to save us all.
I'm so glad you said that too, because that's part of what makes this special, is because this solution is my solution. Therefore, it's part of my story in the game. And when you think about games that have set stories and set progressions and set ways to solve problems, you can talk about the story and like what happens in the plot all you want, and you can enjoy that and you can love that. But when I talk about the Hitman games with people, or when I talk about Tears of the Kingdom, I'm talking about my solutions, my ways that I solve these problems, and they're going to be way different from everybody else's. And that's, it helps these become much more memorable.
Yeah. The designers, I think, on some level have thought of it and some level haven't. Like, there's not a world in which I think the developers at Nintendo thought we'd be crucifying Koroks, but here we are. But that said, like, I think what's been really fun about playing games like Tears of the Kingdom, Hitman, Skyrim, and these games that I've been playing over the years is it's taught me to do less direct solutions, right? To think outside the box. And the example of that is, and we've talked about this before on the show, Ascend, which is one of the new tools in Tears of the Kingdom, was a dev tool. And it made it so easy for them to get around that they went, well, why don't we just give this to the player? It'll make traversal so much easier. And like, the fact that I know in my brain it's so ingrained to not think that way is there at least 2 or 3 times I've gotten stuck in Tears of the Kingdom because I'm looking around going, well, I can't grab anything. I can't build anything. I don't understand what to do. And then I look up and go, son of a, I just need to ascend.
And Legend of Zelda was one of those series that was very infamous for its one item, one solution kind of design. So for it to bloom, open, what have you about it so thoroughly is incredible.
Yeah. And then like with Hitman, like it's a game that I've played and I enjoy. I'm not great at because I'm not very precise or stealthy. I've only been good at being stealthy as Batman, and even still, that took a lot of practice. But like, I love seeing these videos.
Fair did for Batman too.
Right, sure. But like what I love about Hitman is like, this is a game where you're supposed to kill people, right? More or less, or knock them out. But you're supposed to take out targets. And there are often places where they just go, yep, you got to get this, take out this guy. Go ahead. And you could, like, I've seen people do it with rubber ducks and like dropping a piece of furniture on someone or whatever it is. And like, the fact that you're right, Dave, it does become your own story in a way that, like I mentioned Mass Effect before, while I don't think Mass Effect as a whole is completely stoked emergent gameplay like a lot of these other games, I think even the choice narrative that you get in Mass Effect and Dragon Age, the idea that your choices matter and ripple through the other games, it's like, that's my story. For the longest time, I would refer to Shepard as a she because that was my Shepard. My Shepard was Rain Shepard. I played through all 3 games on the Xbox 360, and that was my Shepard. That was my story. And it's in a very similar way. It's like Link's story is of honor as this royal knight who's going to save the princess, but he is also running around half naked because he needed to like do the shrine and they took his weapons away. And so you yeeted spears from across the room until you killed all the robots because they gave you unlimited spears or a ton of spears and nothing else. It's like those kinds of things, but none of that feels outside the gameplay, right? Like Dave and I talk a lot about Yakuza and how the sub-stories are just bonkers, but that's in the main narrative. Like, it's not necessarily an emergent choice that you're making. It's part of the main narrative. Sometimes Kiryu's a goofball. Whereas this, Link is never portrayed in any of the cutscenes or any of the story as a goofball that often. At least in a lot of Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild. Other games, not so much. Like Wind Waker, he's a goofball every 5 minutes. But like, it allows you to be that stoic knight in the cutscenes and still absolutely throw your weapons because you forgot what button you were pressing, and then run and pick it up and then add a bomb to it or whatever else. Like, the game doesn't stop you because it's trying to portray the character in a certain way, whereas other games do handhold that a lot.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I mean, this Link in particular, you know, your Breath of the Kingdom, Tears of the Wild Link here, is one that has history and legacy behind them, the 100 years and everything else, as well as the fact that, I don't think this is much of a spoiler, this is just funny, nobody recognizes Link in Tears of the Kingdom. You walk around, you could say your name is Link, it's like, oh, that's funny, you got the same name as Zelda's guy there, that's really cool. How's that working out for you? And Link is historically a very laconic, taciturn, quiet, silent protagonist. And this Link does talk, but we don't hear it. And so there is a lot of space that can be filled by our actions and what we do. And the fact that you can do the most undignified thing possible and nobody is going to think less of the legendary swordsman Link because this weirdo named Link is not that guy, and that's all fine. This all comes back to that idea of whether it's in game design, whether it's in novels and world building or anything else, the more you codify the rules, the more you have to explain, and the more weird corner cases come up. And so by historical precedent, the words out of Link's mouth, we still fill in bits and pieces of ourselves and our choices into who he is. Even as we get to pick dialogue options where there's like either he's noble or he's a little bit of a bitch. And you can kind of, and I mean that in bitchy, not like a little bitch. And so, or both, you know, it's up to you. But you fill that in as well. And so leaving that space, which is why I think also these sorts of emerging things work so well in open world, because you can't answer every question, nor should you. You just have to close off a couple of ends, make sure people can't draw dicks, and go from there.
And some of those we fail at, but we still do our best. But like,
or sometimes you lean into it and that's a new feature.
Right.
DLC.
Right. But like, it's one of those things where also what I love about these sandboxes is like, that's a term that I never really gelled with till I got to more emergent games. And like this idea that this world kind of exists, even if you didn't, right? One of the coolest things about Prey and Prey Mooncrash, but for me in Prey is like, the minute you learn that the mimics can turn into anything, that means this world exists, and you could shoot or move anything, and it could just crack and fall apart, or it could be a mimic. And my favorite thing was that they would set you up to really think you're going to shoot this thing, it's going to be an enemy, or move on, and then it isn't, and it's from behind. Or like there were certain rooms that lock doors. Well, I can see that window and shoot it, and then I can jump from across the hall. Can I get through the window? Like, they let you play in the space in a way that other games with enemies and or with solutions, like we said before, don't. And I think my favorite part about emergent gameplay, beyond even the world itself, is the stories that come out of it, like Dave was saying. And not only just our stories, like stories with your friends, but we live in a social media age, for better or worse. But like seeing someone create an actual drone that launches another drone in Tears of the Kingdom is stupid. And I mean that with all of the compliment in the world. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's like watching people build emulators in Minecraft.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. That you can play the original Game Boy Pokemon in Minecraft on a giant Game Boy.
I'm glad you brought up Prey and memorable stories, because like I have some stories from Prey Mooncrash that I'll likely never forget. And they're unique to me. I don't think this happened to anybody else. And it's just the result of these many, many very simple interactions that they've coded into the game. I'll just tell a quick one just to give an example of like, this is magic. This is video game magic. In Prey Mooncrash, the goal is to escape this space station with your 5 crewmates, one at a time. If one of them dies, you have to start the loop over again. You get more powerful as you go, you unlock more powerful items, but what you're really doing is you're learning about how the space station works, and your knowledge is what's going to help you get out. So in the game, they have these barriers that won't let alien material through. And in Prey, you inject alien material into yourself to get more powerful. So there's a couple characters that can't get through these barriers because they have too much of this alien material. How do you get through those barriers? They've coded in like 10 different ways to get through it, depending on what you have. you can kill all the other aliens, and then you can get through if your character's not an alien. There's an ability that lets you burrow underground, so you can go under it. There are many electrical ways to disable the barrier and get through it. Some of them you can hack and shut them down that way. I had a story where all of those things failed. I didn't have the ability to burrow underground. And it was my last crewmate to get out. And it's difficult to get out. I was about to be upset, like, I got so close and then I failed. It's going to be really hard to get back to this point. And I just got mad and I shot the computer that was controlling the barrier. And it just turns out that I had picked up a gun with electrical properties, and electricity shuts down computers in that game. So all of a sudden the barrier dropped and I was like, oh my God, run through the barrier, get out in the escape pod. And I beat the game. And that stuff, like, it's not because the game said, hey, here's an electric pistol, stupid, go shoot the computer. It didn't tell me that. I mean, I didn't know my gun had electricity, so it was a happy accident. But had I remembered that, or had I checked the menu, I'd have been like, oh, right, electricity shuts down computers. This computer's blocking this thing. I can't get through without doing this. I don't have an EMP grenade or any of the other many ways to shut it down. So here I go. And I have this solution, this story that sticks with me forever because of how special it feels for my game. And it's not one of those things where you get a quest marker that says, use your electric pistol to shut down the barrier. You know, it's all from these tiny interactions. I'm sure had I spent the money to unlock that burrowing ability, I could have done it that way. Would have saved me some hassle, but I didn't. So had to find another way.
Yeah, and it was a moment of tension that the game hadn't designed for or built around, but you still basically had the action movie moment of nothing's working. I can't do this. Shoot the thing. Oh, there's so many times where that is a narrative in some other medium, and you got to very organically have that. Mm-hmm. That's incredible.
Yeah, it's great, and it's all because the main goal of those games is to set up problems. And I mean, they have hundreds of these little interactions throughout Prey and Mooncrash. And by using what you know about those and what items you have, you figure out your solution. And it's why Prey, the original game, is one of those hidden gems now. Like, people like, everyone should play Prey, and everyone's saying that everyone should play Prey. But nobody played Prey Mooncrash, which is the DLC. And it's like, if you like that Emergent stuff in Prey, you owe it to yourself to play Mooncrash, because it's just like, oh, you like that? Okay, sicko, here you go. Here's level 100.
Yeah, and I think what I like about that kind of freedom is it allows for all skill levels, right? Like, I like to joke that none of my creations in Tears of the Kingdom are pretty, but they get the job done. But the reality is like, you can find the way that works for you. One of the hardest things about most difficult RPGs or action games is if you hit a wall, unless you can change the difficulty, that's it. You've hit that wall. Especially think RPGs that don't have difficulty settings. Hard boss, your only option is to go grind. There's no other solution. You got to beat the boss, right? Whereas I like that there is in a lot of more recent games, especially stuff like we've talked about. The reason I think I ended up enjoying Dark Souls 3 and really enjoyed Elden Ring is that, yes, those bosses, you have to beat them to see the end of that game. But how you beat those bosses are almost irrelevant. Weapons, styles, how many people you bring with you. Like, yeah, it makes the fights harder, but ultimately, like, I beat the final boss of Elden Ring, which I guess isn't a spoiler really, because who cares about this? I won't talk about how I beat him, but like, I brought two friends and they beat the shit out of the boss, and I kind of just plinked away as a mage from a distance, and I won. And the game didn't say, you can't do that, that's cheating. The game said, we have these systems, you're utilizing them, you won, right? One of the things that made Elden Ring playable for me is I played a caster, and I got an advanced staff and spell out of order because I was able, with my horse, to get to that area, get in, grab those items, and get out, and then go back to the lower level area. Other games would gatekeep that. This higher level stuff, you can't get there no matter what you do. But that game, Elden Ring, let me go, all right, you want the most powerful staff and this stupid meteor spell? Great, you've got it. Now use it to your advantage. It's not cheating. It's just playing the game in a different way, and I love that.
Yeah, I think of last year when I played through Divinity Original Sin 2 with some friends of mine.
Yep.
You want to talk about a game that lets you do anything and doesn't necessarily tell you what's going to happen until... Whew. One of my party members really likes playing rogues. So I think every Divinity group should have somebody who likes playing rogues, just so you have to deal with leaning in or trying to stop them from trying to pickpocket everyone. And we ended up burning down and having to kill everybody except one or two people in the first town. I was playing as one of the storyline characters who is dealing with demonic possession. And you go into an area and somebody senses it in you. And it forces your choice to, the demon kind of takes control. All of your fancy dialogue choices become kill, 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 kill. And a fight starts. Apparently, to move the quest along, you're supposed to let them defeat you. And this moves things along. The rest of my party came and joined me. And we slaughtered everyone in that little community. And then cut off that quest, as well as the quest of one of the other party members who was a completely different character who had to talk to those people. And we figured it out and we worked it around and we still moved the story along. Just because we cut off one branch doesn't mean the story ends.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that the choices you make were necessarily good or bad. If you wanted to play that way, that's how you play. You can build it in weird ways where you don't have to fight the final boss. You can negotiate your way through it. No one tells you how to do it. No one tells you that you should do that. There's very little hand-holding in terms of, like you were saying, Dave, with Mooncrash, that, there's nothing that says, do this in order to make this effect happen. It's just, you make your choices and the story happens and you almost lose track of where the choices and motions put these things in motion. And it was one of the few 80-hour games where I beat it and then went, I kind of want to start it all over again because I want to see what else happens.
I'm glad you brought up Divinity because something that got brought up when I did this on my show is tabletop, because tabletop games are built on emergent gameplay. Emergent gameplay starts with simple rules and then how they interact. And so if you're playing tabletop and you have a good game master, emergent gameplay possibilities are through the roof. And I'm glad you brought up Divinity in particular because that's one of those games where your options feel limitless. Like the game doesn't say no. Yeah. And if you're like, hey, I wonder, there's a big poison cloud there. I wonder if I shoot it with fire, if something cool happens. Something cool always happens in Divinity.
Yeah. Sometimes you even survive
That's right. Yeah. Sometimes there'll be so much fire that it'll crash your game, which happened to me in my game in Divinity. Because, those little experiments that you do can sometimes spiral out of control in that game in a very fun way.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to bring up tabletop. I'm not a big tabletop player because I don't have scheduling to play games with people is a nightmare. So I don't play tabletop.
I mean, don't let that stop you. Every tabletop player has that problem.
But tabletop is, if you're playing with a game master and a group of people with good imaginations, emergent gameplay is the game, right? You're just constantly testing what you can do. And if it falls within the hard-coded rules of the game, go for it. Make your own stories. And this kind of goes into emergent narrative a little bit too, which is kind of like a sibling to emergent gameplay, where the stories become your own stories more so than the story of the game itself. Right. So Matt was talking about Mass Effect earlier and how the choices you make, the story of Shepard is your story of Shepard more so than a straight up canon story of Shepard,
Yeah. It's why I think people hate the third game. It's not because the endings are particularly bad from a writing perspective, although that's arguable also, but I think it's because it's a definitive 3-choice ending, and whichever of those 3 you choose, it's so much smaller than everything else. But how you resolve the Quarian Geth War, how you resolve stuff with the Rachni, all of that can be different from player to player with so many permutations. And I think emergent games, both gameplay and story-wise, I think the reason they're fun is that reason you brought up Divinity. We had a rogue, like your rogue, and we always set him on fire. Previous guest of the show, Scott White, played a rogue in our party. And in the beginning, it wasn't on purpose. It was just he was always in the fray. And I was playing a polymorph tank. And so I had spells that put effects on the ground, and seconds later he'd be on fire. And then it became a running gag later on. How can we set Scott on fire in this combat? And it's because the game will always let you do it. On the other end, there are some of these games have limits. I was talking about Fallout and Skyrim earlier. Can't remember what quest it was in Skyrim, but I remember I was pursuing werewolf because I really liked the idea of being a werewolf. Before they added the trees and stuff, being a werewolf was fairly difficult and often got you killed in most places. And I turned into a werewolf in town by accident somewhere. I don't think it was the main town. It was one of the smaller ones. But I turned into a werewolf, and then everyone attacked me. And I was like, well, I need to get out of here, but I'll have to kill some people to get out. So I'll kill them. Next thing I knew, I killed the entire town. It was a town with a major quest line, and I broke the game. I couldn't finish that quest line. I think I could still finish the main story, but whatever quest line that was, which I don't remember what it was, I had killed the Jarl or whoever, and that was it. That was the end of that quest. And like,
Yep.
that's how it can go in Divinity. Like, that's the kind of things you could never do in Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, right? They don't want you being able to screw up the quest stuff. You can't sequence break that game. But games that let you really go off the chain, like the Divinities, the Skyrims, the Fallout, you can absolutely ruin whole quests, if not the main narrative, by killing certain NPCs because they don't want to stop you. Everyone's fleshy. If you take a sword to somebody, that's it. They fall over. They're dead. You're done. And I really love that too. But it also kind of made me very paranoid in Skyrim after that. Because like, all right, well, that quest is gone. I got to figure out how to not do that again. But that adds to your character. So now I was a nervous werewolf who didn't want to kill people because of that experience, right?
Yeah, and those can be part of the design. Some games can have those sort of, even a tabletop game can have the sort of DM that is going to find ways to prevent you from just knifing everyone in the tavern. Or ones that go, fuck around, find out, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. There's room for both, so long as everyone is on board. And this is absolutely why, Baldur's Gate may use Dungeons & Dragons rule set. Divinity is the closest I've ever found to a true Dungeons & Dragons experience when playing online with friends. Having that sort of thing where, yeah, one or two things starts off as a joke. You have that dumb item that's like, oh my God, I roll a crit every time I use this item. Well, now we're going to build a religion around it. Now we're going to figure out how to set Scott on fire every single time. Can't start the battle. Geoff hasn't sprouted wings yet and flown in. Whatever weird thing is going on, those build. And again, you don't get a trophy for it. You don't get an achievement for it, but you do get a lot of fun out of it. One of the difficulties of easy terms for genre or for gameplay experience is open world or sandbox covers all of those experiences. But sometimes you really do want something where, please don't be a Sierra game where I can screw myself an hour in and not find out for another 10 hours that I have killed a crucial NPC and you're soft locking the game on me. Or times where it's like, yeah, I just want to go. Like, maybe that makes me a nervous wreck. Maybe that makes me cavalier about things, whatever it is. But you have to be able to choose that. And I don't know yet whether or not there's more terms that need to come out of this or what, but it is absolutely fascinating. And I do always encourage, when people can, have regular gaming groups with folks. Like the friends that I was playing Divinity with, I'm playing Gloomhaven with them now. The first game we played was Wildermyth. And that's one where it's all randomized elements coming together that made for collaborative storytelling. We would pick characters based on their names, and every person, it's just like, Pistol Hickory was one of our wizards. I never played Pistol Hickory, but I remember that character, and he's now showing up in other games that we're playing and other things that are going on. We got to name somebody? Well, that's Pistol right there. And those sorts of carryovers as well.
Yeah, I think it comes down to personalizing the experience. And I think the games more and more that let us do that. Like, look, I'm a person who's always going to love Shovel Knight and Chrono Trigger and games that are just a story that you are an avatar within and move through. But I think the reason things come up around games, like even Pokemon Arceus and Tears of the Kingdom, people are sharing stories about how they play this game. And it feels most of the time like no two stories are the same. And I have enjoyed more lately playing single player games and story swapping about the things we did to do the thing than actually the story of the game. And I genuinely like the story of both of those Zelda games. But when you think about some of my favorite Zelda games, it's a beginning and an end. Minish Cap will always be my favorite game, but that story is going to be the same for everyone, right? You're going to play that game and you're going to get the same narrative. You're going to solve the same puzzles. It's going to have the same solutions. But Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are not that. You can go fight Ganon at the beginning of both of those games with nothing. And I'll Solo Her, I think, has done that, of course.
Of course.
And like that I love also is that you could beat Elden Ring within the first few minutes. And that's also emergent gameplay and emergent storytelling. You are this badass, so you're going to go beat the final boss. And so you go do it. and it's done. I
Yeah.
think that being able to have that freedom to move through these worlds, and I'll never be that person, but I enjoy seeing that come out of games like this. And I think that choice is always a good thing. We come from a generation and many generations before where like cheating, infinite lives, unlimited ammo was viewed as cheating, but it wasn't. It was just a storytelling device. And then you could play these games differently. I think about Superman a lot, not only because we have a Superman podcast on this network, but a lot of people have failed to make good Superman games because they're like, Superman can't be invincible because then it's not a video game. And I disagree. Imagine the emergent storytelling you could do as Superman or Bizarro if you want to do destruction and just let them run wild. One of the best things about Hulk Ultimate Destruction is that I think you sort of had a health bar, but mostly you could go into any situation and do anything. But the buildings you leveled, the tanks you destroyed, like all of that was part of the narrative because you were indestructible. And it was called Ultimate Destruction for a reason. And I think the key to making a good Superman game is make him invulnerable, give him all his powers. Who cares? Make a good story and a compelling world and give Superman a reason not to destroy it. And there have been other ways that Superman's been manipulated that didn't have to do with his super strength, right? Or his invulnerability. I think emergent gameplay is the road to getting a good Superman game because Lex Luthor has no powers and he's almost beaten Superman many times, you know?
Yeah. So like Tears of the Kingdom is a wildly successful game already, like less than a month after it released. And so people in the industry are going to take notice of its success and try and copy something from it. Same thing happened with Breath of the Wild, where we kind of influenced some aspects of open world design throughout the industry. But what I hope they take from Tears of the Kingdom is the idea of emergent gameplay first and foremost, letting players solve problems their own way and not taking the wrong idea from it, like, oh, every game needs building stuff now. You have to be able to build your own cars in our open world game. That's not what I want from every open world game going forward. What I want is a focus on emergent gameplay because you've seen how this game sells a bunch because it has the Zelda name, but it's taken over the zeitgeist with all of these emergent stories that have come out. And I do think that people love solving their own problems and doing stuff like this. Minecraft is another example, wildly successful game where you make your own story and you make your own fun. But the games that had done this previous to Breath of the Wild, like Dishonored and Prey and Hitman to some extent, nobody buys those games. There's a reason that Arcane went to a live service type game with Redfall. They're trying to make some money. No one bought Prey, and no one really bought Deathloop either. So now that this is shown to be successful, I really hope that the industry takes note that this is magic and you can get people to love your game forever if you give them stuff like this. And if you pull it off, obviously, if you execute it well. Zelda, like Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild 2, have so many other things about them that I think are subpar. Like story, I'm not going to really remember the story of Breath of the Wild for the rest of my life. I'm not going to remember the individual shrines. I'm not going to have great memories about the combat. But I love both of these games so much because of how magical they are, and the emergent gameplay is like front and center for that. So again, I hope that like when people are going to, copycat, try and take stuff from one of the most successful games of this year, not named Harry Potter, take this. This is the magic. This is where the magic is. Just look on Twitter for 5 minutes. You'll see that this is where the magic is. So please take this and don't make me build my own cars in the next Assassin's Creed or God of War or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very funny that I think even the notion of what Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have each in their own way done successfully for Zelda do come back to original thrills that the first Legend of Zelda had on the NES. I am not the first person to say that one of the great joys in Legend of Zelda was realizing how many secrets there were in that game, realizing that you could burn bushes and bomb rock walls and find hidden items and all sorts of secrets. And so that joy of discovery, that's where you could get the joy of discovery on an 8-bit system. Whereas now you get that joy of discovery of what happens when I put wheels on this?
What happens if I tie a rocket ship to this, or a rocket, and then smack it?
Yeah. What happens next?
All of these things
It's an intuitive connection rather than a practical one. An intuitive connection is you don't need to know why you're thinking of it, but here you are. And sometimes untangling that begets new discoveries. Hopefully, fingers crossed, game developers looking to the success of Tears of the Kingdom in trying to untangle what's great about it or how they can make that work for themselves. Yeah, that they don't go, we all need to build cars now, but in the untangling of that, see where it fits in their own narrative. Not everything needs to be a full-on sandbox even to do that. One notion of storytelling that I want to bring up, because I'm the one here who has to bring up Metal Gear Solid, because Matt will not.
Okay.
And I'm very excited for whatever is going to happen with Metal Gear Solid Green Triangle. Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. I know that's what it's called, but it's a lot of fun to me to get it wrong. Is something called the multi-process story. The idea that you are getting to the same narrative end no matter what, but how you get there and how you are seen along the way matters. And going back to the very first examples we were talking about at the top of this episode, Dave, I always think of one of the fights in Metal Gear Solid Snake Eater.
I was hoping you were going to bring this up.
The fear, yeah.
Yeah.
He has stealth camouflage, but his stamina drops very quickly, so he has to stop and get food and eat something to get his stamina back up. But if you give him something that is already an item, so he doesn't have to shoot an animal or take down fruit or something, he will go for that first. Thus, if you drop something rotten or poisonous, he will eat it first because it's convenient, and then immediately be sick, and his stamina drops to next to nothing, and you can just take him out. And there's all sorts of videos out there of people absolutely playing the system that is Snake Eater like a fiddle. And whether it's Hitman, whether it's Metal Gear, whether it's Prey, any of these, I think of old Sokoban style games, those block pushers. And you are given a single room and get to a solution. And again, a more primitive form of interacting is push block, reach goal, unlock door, whatever it is. But what we're getting nowadays isn't that far removed as we think from those same ideas. We're just given different kinds of boxes and new ways of pushing and getting over those walls and getting to those things. And I don't think that means we need a 3D Sokoban. That is not what I'm saying. That, again, is thinking everything needs to build a car now or put rockets on whatever we're doing. But remembering why it is and why certain gameplay experiences, whether they were a single room or a sprawling world or whatever it is, I think you're right that it comes down to the stories that we tell about it and the memories that we make doing it.
Yeah, agreed. I think that there's a time where game developers thought the player is our enemy in the sense that we have to put them through the ringer. They have to do it our way, right? It's our story. But I think more and more developers are realizing, no, it's their story. And we're just letting them be a part of it. And that's nothing to say that people who make games that is one story and one way can't work, right? People have visions, artistic visions. It's why some of the greatest games and movies we've gotten are a very singular message and momentum. But I think the more that developers, indie and AAA, realize, let's reward the player for whatever they do. And Emergent gameplay seems to do that the most. I mean, my favorite thing about Breath of the Wild has nothing to do with the combat, has nothing to do with the story, and it's the same thing that I now love about Tears of the Kingdom. If you pick a direction and you go in that direction without looking at your map, you will hit something. You will hit a camp of enemies. You will hit a Korok seed. You will hit a shrine. You will hit a dungeon. You will hit a challenge. You will hit a town. You will hit a stable. It doesn't matter what direction you pick. You will find something and be rewarded for your time. And there are not enough games that do that. More games are doing it every day. And I think it's my favorite thing about emergent worlds like this is that you get rewarded at every turn. The reward doesn't have to be the same or the same value even every time. You just do the thing, get the thing. And it's oversimplifying a very complex system that I think a lot of people, it's dopamine. It is literally a dopamine machine. And I think that's where it shines the most. Oh, I can light this grass on fire, fly up into the air, get over that mountain and into this shrine area. Even though I wasn't supposed to go that way, I was supposed to figure out how to destroy these brambles in the water, but I can't set them on fire and I don't know what to do. I'll climb a tree. Like, I love all of that because there's no one telling me to do that. It's me telling me to do that and going, hey, I have an idea. This is really dumb. And then being rewarded for being an idiot. Like, it's my favorite thing.
Yeah.
You can give me the whole toolbox, but all I want is this hammer, and I'm going to make everything a nail.
That is why I strongly disagree when people say that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom have poor rewards, and when people say that the open worlds are empty, because the reward is just as often intrinsic as it is a little carrot that you get, a new weapon or something like that. A lot of the reward is like, hey, I thought of a solution to a problem, I experimented, and it worked out. The scientific method is your reward in these games. And a lot of these emergent games give you those feelings, even if you get to the other side of that door and there's a gun you already have or something like that. It doesn't matter because I'm already satisfied that I figured out how to get through this stuff. I'm learning about the game systems. Next time I come across a similar problem, I got something in my back pocket.
Yeah. The game will explicitly tell you to do things if you find the right people to talk to. But if you're just himboing your way through the world, not a care in the world, you're going to stumble into solutions that you're going to go, that can't possibly work, and it does. You get an ability to rewind time, and like the first time I rewinded time to a rock that fell out of the sky and it took me up to a place that I could explore, I went, well, of course that worked. That's literally the mechanic, but I didn't know that it would do that. Like, I think that it depends on the kind of game I want to play. And I think open world games that give me this freedom, I will always take over your yearly Assassin's Creed or whatever else. Those kinds of open world games just feel like, go here, do the thing, go there, do the thing, go there, do the thing. The reason that I haven't finished the story in Tears of the Kingdom is because every time I find a tower and it launches me into the air, I then can see everything and go, well, there's a shrine, there's a tower. Oh, there's something else, and I'm not going to reveal because it's a spoiler. There's another thing. Well, I'll just take care of those real quick, and then I'll move on to the dungeon, no problem. And then it's been 4 hours, and you've still not finished the game.
I feel like every time I get launched out of one of those towers, it adds 2 weeks onto my playtime of the game.
Yeah, because you're like, oh, I can see all this stuff. And I mean, then in its early days, Assassin's Creed was the same thing, right? Like, I think that the second game trilogy, which is the weirdest sentence to say, did some of this the best in the Assassin's Creed series because there were resources and other things. You'd climb that tower, you'd get the bird's eye view, you'd see all the stuff, it would mark the map, and you're like, all right, we would get that flag, get that piece of stuff from my home base, get that thing. I like that the games like this that don't hold your hand. I mean, we haven't even talked about RimWorld or Dwarf Fortress because I have almost no experience with either of them. But like listening to people tell stories about playing Dwarf Fortress, especially now that thanks to Kitfox Games, it's available pretty much everywhere and easily accessible. I kind of want to get Dwarf Fortress, a game I know I probably won't like because it's just not my cup of tea, just to see what nightmarish things I can make happen. Because the game lets you. And on those kinds of games, it's even more so base level. Like, there is no story. You are creating a dwarf fortress and working on a surrounding area. Have fun, do the thing until you can't do it anymore because everyone's died.
Yeah, baby, those dwarves sure do have a fortress.
Those emergent narrative games are like another offshoot of this that are admittedly like also not my area of expertise, but I've had Crusader Kings 3 installed on my computer for 6 months now just because I'm like, whenever I'm ready for some emergent nonsense out of a story, I'm going to check this out because like you said, RimWorld, Dwarf Fortress, Crusader Kings, the whole industry of games built on emergent narratives popping up from all these little narrative mechanics that can interact and create unique stories too. And that's wild to me. Somehow even more so than I know what happens when I light things on fire and I know how this enemy reacts to fire. Somehow like the stories that come out of Crusader Kings are just as incredible to me that's possible. It's wild.
Yeah.
And honestly, you can do a lot more with simple systems and a large number interacting with each other with narrative versus gameplay because, you have to think about deeper numerical consequences, I suppose, of what happens if I freeze this entire city, what happens if I awaken the eldritch horror, versus what happens when I interact with this person, when I'm kind to this person, when I'm not with this person, when I make these things happen, in much the same way that there's a lot of really good rules light TTRPGs, the way that I enjoy that 5th edition D&D moved away from quite as many tables as 3.5 did, because we don't talk about 4th edition, I suppose, is the fact that it left a lot more up to the decisions at the table. And so narrative decisions and emergent narrative is very much that same kind of thing. And you don't have to worry about the game balance as much. And thus, the tapestry you can weave is so much richer, and one that indie developers and smaller teams can really sink their teeth into. A lot of larger studios, the mark of a AAA is, I suppose, how many people you can have working on the graphics in a sort of example. But I think if you're able to close all the loops on balancing emergent gameplay, like Tears of the Kingdom can. Talking with friends who know a lot more about programming than me, it's apparently the more you know about programming and game design, the more impressive what Tears of the Kingdom lets you do is.
Which is why, like, we continued the conversation. I didn't get a chance to say, I don't expect tons and tons of developers, especially indie developers or small teams, to attempt complexity at the level of Tears of the Kingdom. It would be an insane thing to ask of a group of 10 people to do, right? But the idea that you can give players multiple solutions to problems, the idea that you can make small interactions in the world and then build solutions around how those things interact and let people use their abilities, the environment, their weapons creatively, that is something that I think people can do. And there's an indie immersive sim called Gloomwood. It's in early access, and I'm watching that like a hawk, because those are people that looked at the early Thief, Deus Ex type games, and they're like, we want to make one of those. And there's just not a lot of people making those kinds of games anymore, except apparently Zelda is one of those games now.
Yeah. I mean,
we are.
It's funny, we're talking about mechanical stuff. I joked about being stealthy as Batman before, but like the reality that the reason those Batman games made you feel like Batman, a lot of people think it's because of the stealth, but it's not. It's the toys. Think about, by the end of every Batman game, most of those scenarios, they don't tell you how to defeat these goons. You could blow up a wall using your explosive putty. You can throw a batarang. You can freeze someone. You can blow something up. You could go under the grates. Like, I like when games give us multiple solutions, and it doesn't even have to be fully to the scope, like you're saying, Dave, and I agree, of Breath of the Wild. It can be on a smaller scale and still give players literally more than one choice. I understand that it adds complexity to the development, but the more you can give the power to the player, the more we'll all feel like we have more control, right? And it goes back to the accessibility of games too, right? You don't want someone who's just good at combat to be able to finish a game. Yes, I know there are some games that are an exception to that. The FromSoft games are very much get good, right? But even as you and I have talked about, Dave, offline, that's only true to a point, because also those games give you giant swords that if you give yourself the space, you could two-shot some enemies by just swinging that thing around. And that's not like get good. That's know your space and timing, right? Which is a different thing. And I think that the more we understand that, even Metroid, those early games, you know, when it comes to like the difficulty, yeah, they're hard, but also if you know the patterns, if you know the whatever, it's choice and understanding. And I think the more games give us multiple choices, the more we will feel immersed in these worlds in the same way we were talking about with these games.
The multiple solutions thing is interesting because on one hand, you have games that will give you multiple ways to finish a mission, but it's a pretty binary choice, right? It's like, oh, you kill this person or you talk to him or something like that. And the things that are really special are stuff like Hitman, where there's one way to beat a Hitman level. You have to kill your targets. That's how you do it. There's no other way to finish it. But there's a million ways to kill your targets in Hitman. There's a bunch of scripted ways that the game will kind of point you towards, and there are 1,000 unscripted ways. Scripted in the way that, like, if you know how the game works and how people react to stuff, you can take advantage of that. But unscripted in the way that, like, the game will never tell you that if you shoot in this particular angle, you'll hit a fire hydrant, which will fly off the wall and hit somebody. That's not something the game will teach you how to do. That's something you just learn by knowing where the fire hydrant is, knowing what happens when you shoot a fire hydrant, knowing this person's path as they walk next to it. This is an example that's probably not real, but it's very close to real stuff that happens in Hitman. And one last thing I wanted to bring up about emergent gameplay, just real fast, is I don't normally watch speedruns. I don't really care about speedruns. However, games that are heavy on emergent gameplay, like Hitman, like Breath of the Wild, have the best speedruns, because speedrunners, I feel like, are already speaking a different language than me, but people who are speedrunning Hitman, it's like they're speaking alien languages. how they have a mastery over everything that the game does. Every reaction in the game. They're just like, oh yeah, I move 2 steps here, I shoot this falls, it hits this person freaks out, they run over here, yada, yada, yada. And I just beat a Hitman level in 15 seconds, So it's wild.
Yeah, watching a full dog tags run of Sons of Liberty is insane. It's like I do this, I flip through them, I hold this up, sometimes it makes logical sense, and sometimes I'm just going to watch this Tex Avery cartoon that is masquerading as an action movie.
Yeah. I mean, but also with speedrunners, I feel like there are moments in more recent games that have given us the freedom to do this. Like, again, we're mentioning Tears of the Kingdom a lot because it's on the brain and because I can't stop thinking about it. But like,
because we were recording this on May 30th and we've had just enough time.
Yeah. That puzzle that I solved where I just pulled the thing out of the machine and dropped it, like, it made me feel like a speedrunner, right? Like I could go through the hoops of doing what they want me to, or I'll just do this thing with the tool I have and I've beaten this thing in 5 seconds. Like I do appreciate that you can do that, and that even in things where you would think there's only one solution, there are multiple, and it's always incredible to watch. And then you watch proficient speedrunners, especially during games done quick, where like they take the word speed to a whole new level, and like the word speed, the word quick, I don't even think quite explains it because it's faster than that and whatever that implies in your brain. For Let Me Solo Her to beat a game quickly or unarmored is to be expected based on the kind of player they are. But then you watch people who do that and then also beat the entire game in that short amount of time is just astonishing. And it shows that if you give people the tools to do anything, they might do everything. Like they can figure anything and everything out. And I think it's really incredible. And not to say that this is the only way it should be, but I think when it works well, it becomes some of the best experiences we can find in video games.
An interesting way to think about it is because, again, a good tabletop gameplay session where you have a good game master and good players working together, you want to play through the game. You want to explore those solutions. And speedrunning is almost taking the idea of, okay, playing these games is overcoming challenges. It's not getting through this door, it's getting over that wall. Well, the most important wall is the last one. So just get to the last wall by any means necessary. And that is a way to play, but it's not a way for everybody to play.
For sure. We're eventually going to do more episodes on speedrunning and games done quick, specifically just because of how popular it's made being able to see this stuff. But yeah, I feel like we could keep going. There's tons of other examples, other things that we could bring up. I think I would love for you, Dave, at this point. First of all, thank you for joining us. This was a wonderful conversation. This was amazing. We've wanted to have you on for a while. Thank you for doing the 2 side quests you've done. Thank you for the 3rd one that's forthcoming. I really love collaborating with you, and I'm excited for the future stuff that we're going to get to do. But why don't you tell folks, give them a little bit of a longer pitch on Tales for the Backlog and your other podcasts as well, of course, the Top 3 podcast. Tell them where they can find your stuff, where they can support you, and where they can find you online.
Sure. So thank you to the both of you for inviting me on. I listen to this show every week. It's become one of my favorites. So thank you. I'm not shy to say that I'm a patron of the show as well.
Hell yeah, you are.
It's a worthy show.
Yeah.
I love the show. I thank you for the opportunity to come on and talk with you both. To talk about me now, Tales from the Backlog, again, is a weekly backlog games review podcast, mostly going through my own backlog. I buy some of the new releases every year. Tears of the Kingdom, there's going to be an episode on it, but it's going to come out in like 8 months. I don't need to be first on any of this stuff. So that's my show. The first half of every episode is a deep dive on mechanics, talking about the story at a very surface level, maybe some theme talk and stuff like that, but no spoilers. That's the main thing. Because again, I want you to be able to listen to my show, find out what makes Prey or Disco Elysium or Breath of the Wild or Red Dead Redemption 2 a special game, but not be spoiled on what happens. Because I want you to go play these games. If I'm going to take the 2 to 3 hours to talk about them, most of the time it's because I think it's really good. I want to talk about it with someone and I want other people to play it too. Rest in peace, Bayonetta 3, though. So that's my show. And then the second half is a full spoiler kind of discussion, depending on what that game needs. So to give a little tease for some stuff coming up in June, we've got Resident Evil 4 Remake. That's a new game, but again, 4 months late, like I always do. We've got Hi-Fi Rush, The Last of Us Part 2, and the first Baldur's Gate game. That is the June schedule. So some stuff to look forward to, and a little tease with Matt and Geoff and another special guest coming up in a couple months. So That's Tales from the Backlog. My other show is much more straightforward. It's called a Top 3 Podcast, where we do top 3 lists most of the time. That's me and 3 of my buddies from high school doing top 3s like we've been doing since high school, except now we record them and put them out for everybody. So I think that show's a good time. So yeah, there's my 2 shows. You can find me on Twitter. If you just search Tales from the Backlog, you'll find me. That's where I'm most active. Also, the show has an Instagram page, but I don't really know a lot of people who interact with podcasts via Instagram. So I also have a Discord server, which Matt and Geoff are both members of, valued members of.
Yep.
You know, if you want to come in and talk about the games on the show, talk about gaming and stuff, everybody's welcome. Would love to have you. So I think that's all I got. Thank you again.
Hey, that's plenty.
Yeah. If you ever want to be absolutely infuriated, listen to their top 3 podcast episode on the ideal 3 headliners of a music festival, because like these are all old dudes who have no taste in new music. No, I'm kidding. But there were some picks where they're like, I guess I'll pick this person who's one of the most popular artists ever, even though I don't really like them. Yeah. Like, it was very entertaining. But yeah, definitely go check all that stuff. Go review Dave's podcasts. Go rate them if you check them out, because that's what helps all of us the most is ratings and reviews. Before Geoff takes us into the outro, I just want to say again, thank you, Dave, for joining us. And folks, if you've got emergent games or emergent narratives that we didn't talk about, because there are plenty, like you mentioned Disco Elysium, and I went, well, it's not completely emergent gameplay. That game a lot of the times gives you options and says you could do any of these. It might not be advisable to do half of them, but you could do any of them. And then you will probably break Kim Kitsuragi's heart, which is the only person I care about in that game. But yeah, tell us what your favorite emergent gameplay moments are. We shared some here. They'll probably all be Tears of the Kingdom. Well, by the time this comes out, it'll be far enough away that I think maybe it'll be other stuff. But share your stories. I mean, that's the best part about emergent gameplay, I think, which we covered here, is the stories, the personal stories that you get. So please share them with us.
Yeah, and does your definition of emergent gameplay differ in any way from ours? Where does it meet up against sequence breaking? Where does it meet up against challenge runs? Where does it meet up for speedrunning? Do you bring a speedrunner's perspective to these things? What are the great stories, the great surprises in emergent gameplay? Are you also now looking up the early access page to Gloomwood? Because if you're not, you should be right now, because, oh my God, that's why I've been looking away from the camera for the last couple of minutes.
Looks great,
Hot
doesn't
damn.
it? Yeah.
It looks, oh my God, delectable. Just, I love it. But we want to hear from you about all of this and so much more. And there's so many great ways to get in touch with us. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at FunandGamesPod. You can email us at funandgamespod@gmail.com. Let us know what you thought of this episode, what you thought of previous episodes, what you'd like us to talk about, and who you'd like us to talk to in future episodes. You can also check out all of these episodes as well as other things that we're putting out on our Patreon, patreon.com/funandgamespod. You don't have to contribute in any way monetarily to check it out and to help support us, but we'd like to thank those that do, especially those up on the high scoreboard. And today the high scoreboard is Alex Lavelle, Case Aiken, Daniel Needon, Alejandro Alves, Film It Yourself, Patrick Edwards, Rob Tremarco, Robert Proin, and Sean Bowen. Thank you so much for your support and contributions. Please enter your initials. When you start to pick a letter, depending upon the path that you take, it may alter the way that the initials are pronounced, but just get your initials in there. You've got 30 seconds. Thank you so much. You can check out our Discord as well by going to certainpov.com, where you'll find not only a permanent invite link to that Discord server, but links to other fantastic Certain POV podcasts.
You can also find permanent invite links to our Patreon, all of our social media, and that very Discord server in our show notes. Please come hang out. Dave said we're valued members in his, but I cannot thank Dave enough for literally engaging with everything on our Discord server.
Yeah, oh
Makes me wonder how Dave has time to do anything else, but like, always a conversation starter, always want to know what folks are up to, and we really appreciate it. I love the community that we're building. As Geoff mentioned about the Patreon, there's something for everyone there. I wrote an article. If you haven't read it yet, it's about the 2 Coffee Talk games. I plan to do more articles like that are free for all of our patrons to look at. I believe there is a free subscription tier even for a lot of patrons where you can just follow what's going on. do that. If you don't have the money to give now or at all, we just appreciate you being here and being a part of the show. All of the links to all of that awesome stuff, again, in the show notes.
And if we actually need to add like a specific free subscription tier and it doesn't automatically happen on Patreon, because I know I didn't put that in there, please let us know. As with everything else, it's good to hear from you about all of these things, what you're thinking, what is and what isn't, because we love talking about these games, but all of this couldn't happen without you, because this is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm at AK Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Geoff.
What's going on, guys?
Oh, talking about Superman.
Oh, cool. I could talk about Superman.
I could talk some more about Superman.
We know.
I'll bet a few people would want to get in on this.
I'm down.
You know it.
That sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Cool, let's do it. We can call the show Men of Steel.
And you can find it at certainpov.com.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay.
CPOV.
certainpov.com.